Are you continuing with item number 10, Foreshore Protection Strategy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, again. It's been actually a number of years before since I've actually spoken about this particular, although there's been some public input, it's been a number of years since staff's actually reported on this. The work started in 2005, initiated by a report from the Engineering Advisory Committee, and specifically Adrian Rowlands, about the condition of our waterfront and the perceived neglect of infrastructure and our amenities. That the initial work was really spearheaded by that Engineering Advisory Committee, a small group, and supported, I have to say, by Councillor Soprovich and the Mayor, Goldsmith-Jones. You really were two of the large pushes on this project, and thank you for that, because it's made a huge difference in the last few years. The Shoreline Preservation Society was a group that formed out of the Engineering Advisory Committee, and really what they did is helped us come up with some objectives for work along the waterfront. Those objectives: infrastructure protection, habitat gains, resilience to climate change, and then really talking about letting nature do the heavy lifting. I use that term a lot, but it's very important in this process. And we're providing a diverse set of pilot projects for assessment and uptake, we hope, by residents and by other municipalities, because we think we're doing things here that offer real opportunities elsewhere. One of the keys when we look at our waterfront is understanding what nature's processes are and how we might benefit from those. So if you watch my crude efforts at animation, you'll see the mountains erode and the water comes down the creek, something like that. And as it does that, it brings a lot of material down our creeks. And traditionally, we lost that material to deep water. And we also know one other consistent thing in West Vancouver is that all the sediment, longshore transport, moves west to east. So those things happen all the time. Every time it rains, bed load comes down the creeks, and every time we get good wave events or good tide events, we actually get material moving west to east. So things that we could count on, and that's really where some of the engineering principles came from. What we did in 2006 as part of this process was, and very explicitly, we did work in the intertidal zone. The reason being is we identified 8 different projects, some subtidal, some intertidal, and what we wanted to do was gauge people's opinions and attitudes towards us doing this kind of work. So what did we see before we really got busy? In the intertidal zone, we see these kind of things. And, you know, while the construction's going on, very interesting to watch people's attitudes over the years. When we started this work, probably no less than 200 calls a day about what the heck we were doing on the beach with large trucks and machinery. And by, nowadays we're doing the same type of work, same level of disturbance, and we'll be lucky if we get 1 or 2 calls. So people are really understanding a lot more about this work, being conditioned to this work, and being much more accepting of this work. And so we appreciate that. However, I have to say that this was done in this area. This first area was done around John Lawson Park. Last year we tried a little test work around Navy Jack Point, and our vigilant residents let us know through about 200 calls that there was a barge and some rock going down. We managed to get the North Shore News on that one. So it's really great that people have such interest and such caring about what's going along the waterfront. And you can see today, so the difference of that, by us placing some rocks, this is where the bridge is at Lawson Creek. We're taking advantage of some of nature's processes, kicking the creek out to the east, moving bed load along the upper shore, and we've created a significant accretion in this area because we've lowered energy that's actually hitting the beach, and we're creating areas of deposition rather than areas of scour. And this has worked well even during the storm of December 30th this year, while we were seeing significant damage in other places where we traditionally and historically may have seen some damage here. We didn't see any damage along this particular area, which has been some of the focus of our work over the last few years. So just a couple of before and after shots. This is what we used to look like before. This is John Lawson Pier, the toe of John Lawson Pier. We put rocks out now, and you can see the way those are all rocks that were just bare rocks. They've colonized, and what's really interesting from biological, and I come from a forestry background, is when you think about successional stages. And actually, this one was taken less than a year after the work was done. And if you look today, it colonized with barnacles first, then it went to mussels, which are actually oxygen deprivation material, and then now it's actually into rockweed and oxygen-producing material. So we're actually seeing successional stages, same as you would in forestry, which is how I end up looking at these things sometimes. It's interesting to see wherever we place rocks and we give opportunities for growth, how nature takes over. All the rocks you see here that are larger than your hand are actually rocks that are placed, and you see they're less. This is less than a year afterwards. The bull kelp and rockweed goes crazy in some of these areas. This is right down at zero tide, so it's right where we're expecting to see kelp and rockweed, but it's pretty amazing to watch the growth take over. I just want to talk a little bit about subtidal work because it's a little more challenging to sell to people as to the benefits. This is exactly what subtidal work looks like before we're doing it, and if you look closely you can see what it looks like afterwards. Wait a minute. There it is. That's exactly what it looks like afterwards. But what you don't see is what's important, and this is where I think we're making great investments. And, you know, no wonder, this is, some people have accused me of working at snail's pace, so this is me. They found this one on the ground. But this is what's happening under the water. This rock's been there less than a year, and this photo was taken on the latest dive last November. And it's pretty amazing to think that nature works 24/7, 365 days a year. And it's you know, our waterfront is a very, very productive place underground. This was all sand at the time, and so we've added a lot of rock into these reefs. If you look here, another, just offering some opportunities for nature to take over. And much like a forest, adding this structural diversity adds diversity of opportunities. Again, one of the reasons you look at this picture, if you look closely, that little brown line is something I'm going to talk about later. That's some of the coil that we've been putting down and testing off Ambleside, and you see that some of the sea cucumbers aren't minding it too much. And again, not trying to remove all the opportunities, so we're simply adding diversity to opportunities important. Juvenile halibut are there, we know they're there, and without sand, they wouldn't be there. So again, knowing what we have and trying to just simply offer more opportunities seems to be a good way to go about it. We have to be very careful not to create what they call habitat sinks. And habitat sinks are when you go in and they've done a lot of work with this in the States, where they go in and create reefs, and they try to induce lingcod and the return of cod. But what happens is they'll get the juvenile cod in there, and they'll get the spawning going on, but they actually won't find any immature cod, which means they're getting that it's actually turning into a population sink rather than a population source. So they're not actually having successful spawning in those areas. So we're trying to be careful and again, intelligently tinker with these areas and just offer more opportunities, not create just one different opportunity. So it goes on. It's absolutely amazing, the shots. I could provide 100 different photos of the changes that we've seen underwater and the growth that we're seeing there. And it's interesting, I just found out a little while ago that Fisheries does an inventory of shellfish off Ambleside Pier, so I'm trying to get those numbers to see if we're actually going to make some difference over the next few years. So it'd be good with all this rock, we think we will. So we're learning from our successes, and if you look here, this is a great picture of really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get off the seawall and disrupt energy flow onto the, so we're not treating the symptom, which is often just repairing granite edgers and things like that, but we're trying to get out and attack the source of the problem, which is wave energy. So we get down and we get off the shoreline, and we remove two things. We remove some energy, but we remove volume, which is actually where the energy comes from. So wave volume is a big part of it, and these rocks offshore are making a big difference. Some of the other things that I want to talk about is learning from our successes. The Parks Department under Emily did a great job this year of the trail from 15th to John Lawson Park. This is a great example of really, you watch people walking along there. This is a trail in nature now, where it's not us versus nature. This is us with nature. You can't even tell it's been built here. And I was so proud taking some people I knew down there. I said, "How long has this trail been in?" And they said, "Oh, I don't know, a couple of years, 3 years." And I said, "No, actually about two weeks." So that's pretty encouraging when you hear that. So, and it seems to be functioning well during the big storm of December 30th. This held up very well. It had a couple logs knocked on it, and the parks crew got on it right away, threw them back on, and it was like it never been touched. So a real credit to the parks crew for this. It's fantastic work. And not only are we learning from our successes, so is the private people. And there's some really interesting work going on near private lands where they're contributing to work on the public foreshore. This particular area is the foot of 27th, where a number of neighbors now have participated in the work. They've torn out seawalls. They haven't put in seawalls. So, and they're seeing the beach naturalize in a way that, if you look back at the old aerial photos, probably restoring this back before there were seawalls in the area. So really, really encouraging. And, there's been a lot of great work also out at Horseshoe Bay, where we worked with ferries when they were doing some work to lower the wave energy from the new boats. We were able to get them to participate in some work along the waterfront there. That seems to be holding together as well. So again, winning on all ends, the engineering side and the habitat side. So what's next? Well, we've done these pilot projects with a focus on areas that we think people would see. We recognize that there are a few areas that offer some significant challenges with respect to protection of the seawall, namely 25th to 22nd. And so what we're doing now this year, the plan is to actually spend the majority of the $100,000 budget between 22nd and 24th. We're going to put in a pretty substantial reef, as much as we can, with material that we hope to leverage from construction sites. And we'll be doing some work there to try to mitigate some of the impacts along that particular area. It's a significantly different approach than we've done in the past, where we've built fairly small structures. This will be a much larger structure. We're feeling more confident now with what we know and what we've seen, and how we've seen the underwater response to what we've done. Also of interest is in the reefs, in the reef at 22nd, in the reef at Ambleside. As we continue to build them out, we will continue to put in some heavy-duty sklar pipe, it's called, which offers us some opportunities to extract energy from the ocean for heating and cooling. It's being done in Toronto and places like that. So we think it's a good investment to do that as well, and we're working with the engineering department at the foot of 22nd. They're going to be doing some infrastructure work this year, and they're going to look at the viability of running the line up 22nd, so we may be able to tie into the Aquatic Center, the Wetmore site, the Kiwanis site. So Mr. Fong and his team are looking at the viability of that as well. So those are some of the things that are next. Sorry. One of the other things that we were always asked is how we're telling the story, and it's something that haven't done a particularly great job of yet, but we're getting better. We're just working with the communications department, Colin Hibbard has put this map together, and he's created some rollovers. This is just the first edition of it, but what happens is, as you roll over one of the sites, up will come a graphic with some pictures, and there'll be a little bit of detail about the work, so people can actually go to our website, do some rollovers, and see what's going on. You'll also notice the Ambleside Now branding there, so people will be able to roll over that. They can go to the Ambleside Now, because we really want people to be able to surf this site and find a whole bunch of shoreline interests for everybody. So we think we want to tell the story that way. If you look on the far right-hand side of of this slide, you'll see new beach access signs. Anybody that's doing road end work and things like that, part of the budget is to make sure people know this is public access. So we have these signs that will be being installed at all of the places where we do work as well. So I think that's an important learning, and one of the things we're doing now. And while there's more to come, I do want to say that I've been working on this project now for the last 6 years, and I want to thank senior staff, Mr. McCraddo and my boss, Brent Lee, for the trust and support they've shown me, as well as council. I really thank you for allowing us to get this done, because it's really exciting. And I spoke at Qualicum Beach last November, and they just couldn't believe it. They're trying to figure out how we get all this work done. They